Welcome to the third annual Monadnock International Film Festival. My name is Bill Smith. This is the Radar Marketing Group Glass and Gear interviews, and my guest right now is Greg Whiteley. And Greg, you've done a film called Most Likely to Succeed. It was played last night. An incredible, moving documentary about education. Tell me a little bit about what the film. I'll say that it starts off, and I think there's a really powerful scene in the first few minutes of the film with your daughter.
Right.
When you freeze that frame, can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, my daughter had been somebody that loved school and was really great at it. I mean, we would go from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade. All her report cards, all her parent-teacher conferences were stellar. She loved school. She couldn't wait to get there. And then suddenly in the fourth grade, that all stopped. You know, at first I just thought, well, maybe she's going through a phase. And I thought maybe she's sick, because there was a lot of days that she was just, she would fake a cough and not want to go in. And suddenly it dawned on us she just really hated school. And we thought, well, what's going on? And well, is there something wrong with the teacher? And the teacher seemed fine. And their relationship seemed fine. It wasn't until I began making this movie, and so there was a man named Ted Dintersmith and a guy named Tony Wagner who had approached me about making a movie about education along the lines of Tony's book. Tony was an educator out of Harvard and had been part of a lecture series, was a thinker on education. His book, The Global Achievement Gap, was getting some acclaim, and they wanted to turn that into a movie. So I began reading that, and the book basically describes a disparity between what our schools are teaching and what the world is asking of college graduates or high school graduates. It also talks about a level of passion that is being lost in students. And that's definitely what I was noticing in my daughter. And I'd always blame my daughter, that it was my daughter's fault. She just needed to bear down. And school, you know, to borrow a phrase from Louis C.K., well, school sucks, right? You just do it. Everybody knows school sucks, and you just put up with it, and it's a kind of a test of your character. Yeah. That if you're willing to grit down and muscle through all these hours of worksheets and sitting in a row and listening to somebody lecture to you facts, and then you spit those facts back to that person. If you survive that, and not just survive, but if you can navigate that and do well, and kill off anything in your human spirit that's causing you to rebel against that sort of conformity, you're going to get into a good college and you're going to get a good job. But in reading this book and in studying the issue, you realize that's not true. You can do all of those things, and you have today a 53% chance of being unemployed, unemployed or underemployed. I mean, you could get a job that you just could have just as easily had gotten if you'd skipped school. Right. So. In that moment, in that pivotal moment in the beginning, before you go on, and in the film, you start to sort of go back and look at the history of how the education, you know, the structure of what we do today, how it kind of came into place, and how it changed from some historic moment. Yeah. But that very moment with your daughter, I thought was pretty awesome, because she's talking to the teacher about the problems of focusing, and your wife, I guess, is with her, and she seems concerned enough that she's sort of in tears because of she's the subject of this thing, and why is she not concentrating, and then she glazes over and just sort of looks off, and you freeze the frame there, and that's pretty much the classroom. I mean, I interpret it as that's the classroom that we've all been a part of, where the teacher's talking and rambling on some stuff, and you just start to glaze over. Well, yeah, I noticed that. So there's lots of thinkers that appear in our film that have spent a lot more time on this issue than I have. But what they would tell you, Ken Robinson being one of them, Jed Silverstein is another one. The process of going through traditional school, it was invented for a completely different time. So the idea of conforming to following a set of instructions, to memorizing a bunch of facts and spitting them back, that was very useful to train industrial workers. To have that skill set helped you to be a really good factory worker, to be a really good assembly line worker. But today we live in a completely different world. So the ability to follow instructions, it's not as useful anymore. We're not suggesting that you don't need to be able to listen to someone and interpret what it is they need from you and then give it. But that's a different access. That's a different skill you need to access. And the problem is, in trying to become a really good industrial worker, we've found you're killing off something that would actually be even more useful to you in this economy. Yeah. A level of creativity, a level of innovation. Even Jed Silverstein goes as far as to say a level of nonconformist thought. A sort of anti-authoritarian. I wouldn't take it that far, but I do think having the ability to tap something inside of you that is your passion. What is it that you love? That's going to lead you to greater levels of success than just learning how to squelch that in order to follow instructions.
So part of your film, when you get into the following you follow several students in this very innovative school in San Diego called High Tech High, correct?
Yeah.
But before you get into that, you talk a little bit about the change of how technology in the workplace is changing, and I found that incredibly fascinating because you pinpointed a couple moments in time where things changed, like the chess match with Blue, the IBM Blue computer.
Right, Deep Blue.
As a moment in which, the cards had changed, the table had changed, the people now are being beaten by a computer. And then you go on to look at Jeopardy. And then when you talk about, and you look at just the timeline of history in general, and you think about, how long it took for people to get off of using leeches to to cure medicine, and now it just keeps doubling and doubling and doubling, and we're in a time now where it seems like things are doubling, almost on a yearly, couple-year basis. Technology is just going through the roof.
Right.
So the point that I sort of saw in your film is, what are these kids going to do when they get out of when are they going to get out of high school? Because so many things are replacing the average jobs now. What is going to be the next job, I guess? And I found that really fascinating with your film, because when you start to think about where things are going, if we're being replaced by all this technology, what is the next job?
Yeah. Well, if you have a kid in school right now, the odds are they're going to work in a job that hasn't even been invented yet.
That's what I thought was fascinating about that.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the future is.
That's right. So how do you prepare for that?
Right.
But we do know what it's not going to be. It's not going to be an industrial job. It's not going to be a factory or assembly line job. It's not even going to be a routine white-collar job. That's the thing that's most startling. We know that the blue-collar jobs have gone away. They started going away in the 70s and then rapidly so in the 80s. But what's happening now is we have a guy named Andy McAfee, who's an economist out of MIT, and he shows us a Forbes jobs report. He holds it up. There's a Forbes jobs report.
Yes.
And he goes, it's very vanilla, and we cut to it. And we show different
article.
phrases.
You can see the article.
Somebody who had written an article for Forbes. Yeah. It's like if you had graduated from college as a journalism or a business major, and this would be an entry-level job at Forbes, to take data from a company and write a report, right? It's very vanilla. You're going to be graded on, you're going to be judged by your editor on how accurate are the facts, how clean are the prose, and the detail of it. And as you read it, it's a very clean, well-written article about a company. And then he reveals at the end, it was written entirely by a computer. So this isn't something that is happening in the future. This isn't some dystopia that we've got to be nervous about. These jobs are being replaced right now. 5 years ago, there was a company that sponsored a race in the Mojave Desert, a driverless car race, and it was a 200-mile course. You had to get from point A to point B. The winner would get some big cash prize. They had a number of teams. The winning team got 3 miles before the car just couldn't function anymore. And very smart people have looked into the future and thought, well, one of the jobs that's going to be safe is all of those jobs in our economy where it requires driving. Because to make something as simple as a left-handed turn in oncoming traffic, a left turn, is so complex. There's so many things happening in the human brain that people 5 years ago just thought that will never be replaced. And here we are 5 years later, and Google has a fleet of driverless cars that have logged over 115,000 miles on busy U.S. streets and highways, and not a single accident. And then McAfee stops and says, well, sorry, there's been one accident. It's when a human driver rear-ended a driverless car.
Oh,
so
so it was a human error.
Just think in 5 years, and that's going to just keep happening exponentially.
Well, and going back to that Jeopardy moment you talked about, the gentleman that was on the winning streak for Jeopardy. I can't think of his name, but
Ken Jennings.
Ken Jennings, yeah, and he was saying, you know, that he wasn't worried because there were so many algorithms that go into a computer and they can't understand the, you know, the complexity of the tricks that Jeopardy uses and the context of the wording and the questions and stuff and the red herrings and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
And boom, the computer started winning and ultimately won.
It beat the world's best trivia champion,
yeah.
Ken Jennings.
So those moments, the chess moment, the Jeopardy moment, and now you're talking about the Google thing, you know they're going to happen because they have, and they will.
Well, the computer right now that IBM developed to beat Ken Jennings in Jeopardy is now working in hospitals to diagnose patients. Wow. So think about a doctor. I mean, that would have been inconceivable just a few years ago, that somebody who is a doctor, that job would be safe. You've gone through medical school, your level of training, you're meeting with a patient, your level of expertise in the area of medicine, and we are seeing a day in which at least a good chunk of the doctors, at least a good chunk of what they do, is conceivably replaced by a robot. So that begs the question, how should we be preparing our kids? What skills and what jobs lie in the future? And there's been a number of thinkers that appear in our film that identify a handful of skills that they believe are going to be very difficult for for robots to displace.
And then in comes this high school that's very innovative, and it was created by a very innovative thinker that you feature in the film.
Right.
And describe the high school a little bit in terms of what these kids basically are up against when they walk in the doors for the first time, in terms of how does it compare to a regular high school?
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell you my experience. Tony Wagner said, look, I'm going to send you to a number of different schools around the country that I think are doing it differently and doing it in an interesting way. But I want you to start with my favorite school, which is in San Diego. And so we went there, and the moment you walk in, the campus is so different. It just looks different. It's full of student work. And we learned later that every semester they have final exams, but the final exams are not written final exams. They're not these multiple choice, you know, sit down, pencil in the bubble final exam. The final exam is a project that you exhibit on a night they call exhibition night. And the projects that are the best are then displayed somewhere in the school. So it's just full of these fantastic science, art, humanities, history projects throughout the school. And it's beautiful. The second thing we noticed was it's very difficult to find the teacher. When you walk into a classroom, it really kind of seems chaotic. Kids they're standing up, they're going from one desk to the next, they're working in these groups, some are off in a corner reading a text, others are arguing with each other, and it almost looks like, oh, well, you've come on a day in which they're preparing for summer break or something, because there doesn't appear to be any order. There isn't a teacher standing in the front lecturing. Right. In some classes that's happening, but just occasionally. In most classes it's kind of difficult to find where the teacher is. Yeah. Sometimes he's tucked away back in his office meeting individually with a student. Sometimes he's just sitting there in the corner observing the chaos that's going on. The other thing I noticed was there's no bells ever to indicate when there's the beginning of a class and the end of a class. And that sort of began us on a journey of breaking apart traditional schools and all these things that we've taken for granted. The fact that you've got to have a bell, and the class is like 45 minutes long, and then you shuffle down the hall, and in one class it's science, in another class you learn history, and then in another class you go down the assembly line and learn math. These are all constructs that were invented, we learned, 124 years ago to prepare kids for the Industrial Revolution. So now we continue to throw kids into that construct, and we're surprised that when they come out the other end, half of them can't find jobs. And it's growing. That's trending in a really bad direction.
Yeah.
And it's not related particularly to a downturn in the economy, because our economy, in many measurements, is as strong as it's ever been. We are producing more wealth than we've ever produced as a country, but median income has remained flat. And we're not saying education is the sole reason for that, but it's no longer performing the function it once did to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
So it has to change.
Yeah. And as you follow these students through it, this sort of project-based tasks that they have. I mean, I was going to say class, but it's not really a class. I mean, because I don't even know what to call it, because it's so freeform. But basically, these projects that these kids are going through, and you're following them, and you can see the transformation of these children from the first day of class, which was brilliant. You know, these kids come into a class, and the teacher basically walks in and says, "Here, do this," and then he turns around and walks out and goes into an office and watches them from a window. And they're all just kind of like, well, you know, what's going on? They're waiting for direction. They're waiting for somebody to stand in front of the classroom and start talking to them. And it was interesting to see what happened then, which was pretty much nothing. They didn't know what to do. They were you know, stalled out. But then to watch them transform through the year, as you follow these kids, and then to see the end result, it's amazing, the transformation.
Yeah, these kids that come to High Tech High, they're used to a different way of school. And they have this great theory. How they do things at High Tech. They take their best teachers. Traditionally, at a school, your most gifted teachers typically teach 11th and 12th grade. That's where the most advanced stuff is being taught, and so you kind of put your best teachers there. The way they explained it to me is that we take our best teachers, we put them in 9th grade, because they feel like if they can get them started in the right way, they become so much easier to teach later. And one of them is this guy that you're talking about, Mark Aguirre, who has this classroom. The kids come in, they sit down, they're used to just being lectured to, and the first day of class is he gives them what seems to be a pretty simple set of instructions, but it's, hey, move all your desks and move them into this order. And you guys figure out how to do it, work as a team. And then he leaves. Yeah. Leaves the classroom. This is the first 30 seconds of class, and all of a sudden there's no teacher there.
Right.
And these kids are totally lost. They all kind of look at each other like, is he serious? What are we supposed? We're not used to, what do we do? We're used to just sitting here and having the teacher kind of lecture at us and tell us everything what to do. Now he's kind of giving us a very broad, simple statement, but he's asking us to figure it out. And the genius in that is, as you noted, as you come back later throughout the semester, these kids have completely owned their own education. They're not waiting for a teacher to tell them step A, now step B, now step C. They've taken in charge, and even to such a degree that they began coming up with their own assignments. Yeah. And as you get into 12th grade, which we don't feature at this school, they come up with their own internships, which isn't new. This happens in other schools as well. Yeah. But the level of ownership that they have taken, I was completely impressed by. And frequently, it's a demographic of kids that we are used to seeing fail in this country. They are kids that come from homes that are low-income homes. Many of them are coming from single-parent or even no-parent families. And we're used to that section of the student population just failing, right? And we've always thought, well, how we fix that problem is if we could just get their performance to match those of the rich suburban kids, well, then that would be problem solved. And High Tech High has done something much more different. They've instituted a curriculum that the kids take ownership of, and they drive their own success, and their success speaks for themselves.
Yeah. So after this movie finished last night, and you were taking questions and answers from the audience, and the one question I was waiting to ask, and then somebody finally asked it, and I was begging to know at the end of it was, what happened to your daughter? Because at the beginning of the movie, we see your daughter's struggling, going, paying attention. And I was surprised to hear you say,
well, during the filming, we fell in love with the school, so my wife and I, we moved to San Diego. My daughter and my son are in the High Tech High system.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it had that much of an impact on you. You moved across the country just to be at that school.
Yeah, but it is San Diego.
Well, yes. It doesn't hurt to be in San Diego.
Yeah.
So what's next for you then? You've got this documentary out. Are you trying to get this into schools and in front of the government and types of things like that?
Yeah, well, it'll have a very traditional documentary distribution model. It'll be on some premium cable network or a streaming service. It'll be available that way. But before, what we want to do is make it available to communities, schools, parent groups that would like to use the film to become educated on the ways that schools need to change and to use it as a tool for change. And we have got, if it's okay, I'll mention the
absolutely.
website.
I was going to ask you about it.
But integral to this will be gathering people who feel that schools need to change and change in this way. And the best place that we've advocated for in order to gather this network is through the website. So it's Most Likely to Succeed. It's MLTSfilm.org. MLTS, Most Likely to Succeed, MLTSfilm.org. Okay. Or you can text to 97,000, the letters MLTS, and you'll get prompted to join the website and join the network, and you can request a community screening, and we'll work to accommodate that.
It would definitely be worth taking the effort of doing this if you're interested in it. It's an amazing, moving film.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best of luck with it. Are you working on another documentary coming up?
Yeah, you're always working on 2 or 3 documentaries. Good. So yeah, if people are interested, you can go to my Facebook page, Greg Whiteley at One Potato Productions, or on Twitter or Facebook, and we'll keep people posted.
Good, great. Well, thanks for doing the interview, and I appreciate it, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.